Welcome to Season 4 of She Ventures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. She Ventures is a podcast about women who are pivoting in their lives and careers. We live in a world where women of color founders raise 0.5% of all venture capital in 2020, and women overall, a paltry 2.2%. This podcast is about elevating women's voices. Our new website, sheventurespodcast.com, provides resources, actionable tips, mentorship, and community. We do not subscribe to the idea that there is a dearth of fundable ideas from women. There is no pipeline problem. There may be a visibility problem, and that is what we are here to fix together. Let's talk about the reality of women, money, entrepreneurship, and work-life balance on this season of She Ventures. She's pivoted from a human resources executive for big brands such as ABC and Disney to creating SteelCraft, a company that uses repurposed shipping containers to create urban eateries with its flagship location in Long Beach and two others in Southern California. We're going to ask her how she did this pivot from C-suite to building culinary communities. She's here to tell us about it. Kim Gros, welcome to She Ventures.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
It is. And as I was telling Kim before we went live, or we're not live, but before we went on video, is this is our first experience with video at She Ventures. So please be kind to us whenever this airs. So I always like to start out by just knowing a little bit about you. Before we discuss your professional life, can you tell us a little bit about Kim as a girl? Where did you grow up and what were some of your role models?
So I grew up in Long Beach and I still live in Long Beach. So my family, my parents live about 10 minutes away from me now. At one point I lived across the street, which feels crazy, but I needed help with my three kids. And then I have one younger sister. She's 4 years younger, and she also lives in the Long Beach area still. Role models, probably my parents would be two people that were both working hard, doing things they love. That was the thing that I just enjoyed so much. My dad was in theater, so he ran a theater academy in LA. And I can remember still to this day being 7 years old and stepping into the theater and being able to stay out late till like 10 or 11, watching some of the productions or the rehearsals. And then my mom's actually 52 years as a flight attendant for United Airlines.
Incredible.
Yeah, both of them just committed and both of them always went to work happy. I mean, of course, there's problems and issues and stresses, but overall they felt good. They felt good at their job and they felt like they had something they could do to better their job or better the environment that they step into.
And so they instilled in you, I would imagine, a tremendous work ethic.
Yeah, right. For sure. Absolutely.
And so was there a defining memory or event that shaped you when you were growing up?
There's a few moments that have shaped me. I'm trying to think of in what way it shaped me. You know, I was telling somebody just yesterday, they made this comment that your family is always present to celebrate or to be there part of in moments of grief and moments of stress. Like they're just there. And I was telling them, you know, I used to row for UC Irvine and we had a race in Stanford. And the race, it was my first year rowing. I was seat number 4 and our colors were, you know, blue and white for Irvine. And your race is about like 6 or 7 minutes. And I'm racing. And then we finished the end and all of a sudden I get a phone call from my dad. And my dad's like, Kim, we saw you. We drove up from Long Beach to Stanford. We saw you race and it was so great to see your red colors. And I'm like, oh, Dad, you actually did not see me. You were rooting for somebody else. He's like, but we saw you, but then we had to get home because your mom was leaving for a trip. And it was a moment in time where I thought, gosh, they're willing to do anything, to drive anywhere just for that short minute of being part of our exciting story or what they thought was our exciting story. So I think that was a moment of pivot for me of like, yeah, every little thing matters, and the importance of being part of that with people you love and you care for. Yeah, that was a pivot.
Oh, absolutely. And, that resonates with me too. I believe you have 3 sons, correct?
I do, or 2 boys and a daughter. My little one's a girl.
Okay, 2 boys and a daughter. And I have 2 daughters. And I will say, as a parent, showing up in those small ways, I think is so meaningful. And I completely understand what you're saying, because I try to do that myself. And I have teenagers right now. So a lot of the time, I'm not really sure whether what I'm saying is actually going anywhere, but I have to believe it is. And I do think it matters, even though they act like it doesn't sometimes.
I know. One day they're going to wake up and be like, oh, they were always there. Or like, that was unusual for most people, but normal for us, right?
Exactly. Like, we have a lot to be grateful for. So your undergrad was in communications, and then you did a master's in clinical psychology, which I think is really interesting. What made you interested in clinical psychology and that pivot?
It's so interesting because I ended up going to college for soccer. So I had no idea what I wanted to do. Was going to play soccer, and I did crew at the same time. I had no idea.
So you were an athlete. Did you go on an athletic scholarship?
Yeah. I played for a year, and then actually decided that I wanted to be a pilot because my mom was in aviation. So I left UC Irvine, went to Long Beach City College for 2 years and did an aviation associate's degree. And then September 11th hit, and I realized, based on my mom sharing with me, this is going to hurt the industry. Are you sure this is the route you want to go? Decided to pivot, and then actually ended up going to Cal Poly. And what I loved more than anything else was communicating. And in that, I mean, I love this opportunity to help shape language and allow that to help shape decisions, right? Like to influence, to negotiate. So I ended up going to Cal Poly, graduated in communications, really loved it. It was a small department because Cal Poly is huge in agriculture, but I found this like little niche. And then I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And went back and forth, and ended up going into psychology. Got my master's there in clinical just because I love this opportunity of helping people become better, knowing themselves better, being able to communicate even that better.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what clinical psychology is. And so from clinical psychology, I'm really interested, I think maybe also because my older daughter's applying to colleges, and she's sure she wants to be a psych major. And so I'm interested in hearing from you as someone who's gone that path. You went into HR, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But what are the career paths that you see for people with either bachelor's or master's degrees in psychology? Do you think it's a good degree to have?
Yeah, it was for me. I'm actually married to a psychologist. So he is his PsyD. I mean, he's PsyD, more on the clinical side than a psychologist with a PhD. But it was great in regards to understanding people. So I think that, yes, the psychology degree was fantastic. My husband works with a lot of MFTs. So those that do get their master's degree in MFT for psychology, it's a great route to go.
What is MFT?
Oh, marriage and family therapist.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of people that were in my master's program were becoming marriage and family therapists. That's what they wanted to do. And you don't have to work with families. You don't even have to work with married couples. That allows you to step into the psychology to become a therapist. That's what they call it. But you could be I'm a therapist working with one individual to better themselves. And that's still within the marriage and family therapy family.
Could people, in addition to being a clinical psychologist, well, that's really a PhD, but I guess a psychotherapist is what master's is called now. What are the other opportunities? HR is obviously one of them. Are there others that you can think of offhand?
Oh, gosh.
And if not, that's fine. We can totally move on.
I can't.
That's okay.
I just knew when I was in school, I knew that I loved people, and I really wanted to understand how to be part of their story, which is why I ended up going into clinical psychology. But then I knew that it wasn't what I wanted to do every day. I didn't want to sit one-on-one, but I did want to make an impact. I never heard of HR. I had no idea that it even existed. And somebody had cast a vision of, taking this position to help companies be the best version of themselves by looking at its people, right? Like helping people in their positions, filling gaps, giving them training opportunities, recruiting the best people, help promoting the best people, helping fix issues that deal with employee relation issues, right? To be part of restoration rather than destructiveness. And that was like so compelling to me. That was like the story I wanted to be part of. And I cared a lot about business. I loved numbers. I loved creating something. I loved selling something. So for me, it felt like bringing in business and people really well.
That makes so much sense to me. And so you went into HR, and I know that you initially went into, as everyone does, like smaller companies, but then worked for some very large, iconic brands. And I was wondering, having worked for both kind of smaller and larger brands, what were the parts of your job that you absolutely loved, and then the parts of your job that you really hated?
Yeah, that's a great question. I loved the culture making. That was my favorite piece of it. In HR, you conduct surveys, right? You do surveys every year and find out what's working and what's not working. And I loved swimming through the data. And I loved hearing what we do well and then the areas that we need to concentrate a little bit more on. And a lot of it had to do with culture. How do you help make a space the best it can be? And there's a lot connected to that, right? Are there recognition programs? Are there snacks? Is there permissive leave? Is there good career development? Is there training opportunities provided? Like all of that. Are we paying well? That's all part of the culture piece. So I really enjoy that. The piece I don't enjoy, maybe the commute. Every place I worked had long commutes. Disney was out in Glendale. I worked for a company, Laguna Hills. It was just long commutes, but you do that, right? I was working for Disney. I had little babies at home, but I knew I needed a company that was strong and bold, that had good training development plans in place so that I could become the best HR professional. So yeah, at the time, there was not a lot of podcasts. I can do it now, but that was the worst. The HR job for me, though, fit me well. I don't know if there was a part I didn't love, but I also feel like I have a purpose in work. I think that's been really, really valuable part of the narrative, is that if you go into work as I'm part of restoring it or helping it become restorative and healthy and good, every part of it actually feels pretty enticing.
So naively, what I would have thought is the worst part, but maybe you get trained on how to do it, would be letting people go. I would imagine that would be hard. I've had to do it myself, and I have no HR training, and it was pretty devastating for me and for them. Is it that you're trained to do it, and so you kind of know that there's a process in place and you do your best to support people?
For sure. Yeah. People are always like that. You do that? I mean, there were times I would fly all over just to let people go. But I think there's a few pieces to that. Number one, no one should ever be surprised, right? Like you've communicated enough. You have it in written warnings, performance plans. Like you've done everything because your hope is to keep them. So when the time comes, I think there's having emotional intelligence. I think it's having empathy, but it's also coming with confidence that allows the conversation not to feel so foreign, because at some point they know it's just not working. I've provided you everything and it's just not working. And when it happens like that, it almost seems like both parties are like, I got it.
Relieved, probably, right?
Yeah, I think so. No one wants to do bad work. No one. I mean, everybody wants to shine in the way that they can. And if they're not, it feels very shaming. Like we put that upon ourselves, right?
No, I agree with you. I think these things can be very serendipitous. What would you say is the most misunderstood part of human resources?
I just think the role as a whole, I don't think it's communicated very well. I think people's experience with HR is that it's black and white, that you hire and fire. That's kind of it. You don't want to see them. You don't want to like go to their office. But actually, we're part of like beautification. Like we're part of making things streamlined and effective. And I think I wish that HR people saw that as their role.
Well, I really like that you brought up the perks, the programs. I think diversity, equity, and inclusion has now become an increasingly large role. And so all of those cultural shifts, I do think makes it a lot more interesting of a position, and it could be incredibly gratifying, as you're saying. And so you did that for more than a decade. And then how I'm understanding this, and so help me along, is that you became involved, it seems like almost at the same time, in two new ventures. One, which is called Therapy Travelers, which, as I understand it, is an HR company specializing in recruiting people that help with special education.
That's right.
The second one, which we'll talk about as well, your move to create SteelCraft. So how did that all happen? Was it about at the same time?
Yeah, it was the same time. I felt like we were living, it was grit. I feel like, yeah, my husband was in school becoming a psychologist. He had a career for 10 years and then he changed his career path. And I was actually working part-time in HR while I was dreaming of other things. So I partnered with a cousin and a friend, and we created a staffing firm. We did that for 10 years. We recently sold it in December of 2021. So I'm no longer working with them. But yeah, it was 9 years that we had that company, and then we sold it to Epic Staffing. And then while we were doing that, it was building SteelCraft. That felt like more of this like love passion. It was like a love project, right? Like I would travel all over the US and go to great restaurants and outdoor eateries, and they were always like fitting the DNA of the city it was in. And then I'd come back to Long Beach and I'd be like, we're a diverse city. We have great people, but I didn't feel like we had a lot of like community driven spaces. So that came out of a love project to see a good place to drink good beer, eat good food, be with friends, listen to good music.
So to make sure I understand, Therapy Travelers is the company that you sold.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
okay.
We sold that, December 2021.
Perfect. Understood. So then you said, what's next? And so, I mean, how did this happen? How did you shipping containers, repurposing them, food? That's a big pivot.
Yeah, it does feel like a big pivot. So Long Beach is the second largest port in the world. So we have shipping containers everywhere. If you're on the 710 freeway and you're going south, you are 50% chance you're going to be behind one or beside one. So they're everywhere. And so as I was thinking through how do we create a space that fits the DNA of us, it makes most sense to build them out of those. At the time, the only one that I knew that existed was in Las Vegas. And Las Vegas had created kind of a shipping container outdoor mall. And so I knew it could be done. I wasn't looking for it to be built the same way, and I didn't want retail, but I knew if we had the right piece of land and the right partners, we could make it happen. So then it just did a lot of research.
I was going to say, like, I was trying to envision, okay, shipping containers, but there's so much that one would have to do. In addition to buying the land, there, I'm sure, are so many permits. And when dealing with food, there are so many laws, and understandably so. How did you educate yourself on that process? That's incredible.
Yeah, no, we only intended to build a small one, maybe like 2 or 3 containers. And then, how it's all who you meet along the way. And I found a piece of land and I fell in love with it. And I'm like, this is the land I want. And thank goodness for really good economic development partners. So in the city of Long Beach in the Vic Spinoles area, there's a guy named Blair. And Blair is part of the business association. And I met with him at a Starbucks. I'm like, this is my crazy idea. I don't really know how to do it. I'm not in construction. I don't own a restaurant. And I said, but there's a piece of land I like. And he directed me to the owner. And over time, the owner's become my partner. So I've been with him since we started back in 2013. And he was a general contractor.
That's incredible.
Crazy, right? Like he never used containers, but he knew how to build them, or at least knew how to ask the right questions. And then we worked together, me as a curator and him as the developer.
And where did the capital come from? Did you raise money to do this? Did you bootstrap? How did that go?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the Small Business Development Center, SBDC, and I'd actually worked for them in HR. I did a little consulting with them over time. So I ended up going to them. I got a loan. I think it was called a VCA loan for a bunch of money. I put my house on it. Oh my gosh, my husband looks back and he's like, we were crazy. But I took out a huge loan In my opinion, it felt like a huge loan at that time.
I'm sure it was. I mean, it's scary.
So scary.
What people don't realize is that it could have gone totally the other direction. And then, your house could have been on the line, right?
It was so crazy. And little did I know that the amount of money I got was like a seventh of what the final cost was. So I do feel like there was a lot of graciousness that was provided. But my partner and I worked together and we were able to get the funding we needed. But, it probably would have been cheaper to build a building. Everybody thinks it's so cheap, it's so easy. And it was not that. It was opposite of that. Yeah, if you go to the website, steelcraftlb.com, you can see the 3 locations. Long Beach is 5,000 square feet. And even the 5,000 square foot one was expensive to get it up and running.
I can imagine. I mean, I've only done housing renovations. And what I've learned there is that everything is always double the expense of what you think it's going to be and double the time.
It's crazy. Yes, right.
So I love the vision, and you talk about the DNA of the community, which I understand. But if I understand correctly, it's also like an incubator for restaurants who can kind of try their business out and see if it succeeds. Can you talk a little bit about that part? That's fascinating.
Yeah, so we wanted to have kind of a mixed bag of vendors. We wanted vendors in that had a following, that had notoriety, but then we also wanted to provide space for vendors to come in who this might be their first brick and mortar per se, right? They had a really great product. They had, working on some strong branding, but they needed an opportunity, because you open a restaurant and you're looking at $1 million to get that started, So what if it cost you $70,000 to $80,000 to come in and get your feet wet, right? So that's been exciting to see businesses grow and develop. And we always tell them, we don't want you just to have one. Like, we want this to be your first one, and then you just continue to grow, right? You begin to understand your product better. You begin to understand the way that your process efficiency works inside the container. But we want this to be, yes, an incubator space to try it out and see, is this truly, truly what you love to do and where you want to spend your time?
And so far, because you've been doing this for 5 years, I don't know how long the actual restaurants have been there. And I guess it depends because, right, they were built over time. But have they been largely successful? Have some of them decided it wasn't for them? How is that shaken out?
Yeah, I think COVID was probably the hardest space. We noticed a theme that we had at least one vendor that didn't work during COVID for different reasons. We had one that they were both nurses and they wanted to go back to the hospital. And they realized that's where their love was, not in the restaurant business. But most of the vendors that did well during COVID were more established than the ones that were new.
So those, I guess, would have been the ones who brought food to people, I'm guessing, during COVID? Like, were they doing takeout?
Yeah, I know. What a crazy time. Yeah. So, yeah, it was all done by takeout. We had some vendors that created like a bodega where they would actually sell fruits and toilet paper and as a way of bringing people in and trying to make an income. But yeah, those that had a to-go service continued to do well. Pizza did very well in Long Beach. Mexican food did very well. And it was those that knew how to, handle the to-go market. But it was crazy as it was for everybody. But we lost on average about one vendor per space. But we have some that don't work out anyways. We're working with one right now in one of our locations where they don't fit our culture, to be honest. Like, we live out of 3 values and we don't feel like those values align to them. We've lost other vendors because their price point's too expensive, right? You have a great product, but it's too expensive for this market and you're not willing to roll with the punches a bit and reevaluate. So there's a few reasons people leave, but our hope is that they leave not with frustration, but a leave that this just wasn't right. It wasn't that it wasn't good, just that it wasn't right fit.
What are your 3 values?
So we value 3 things. First of all, is we value community. We started from that. We value it outside, the neighbors that that are invested in the space, and also the community within the vendors themselves. The second one is that we value restoration and sustainability, that we're really thoughtful in the products we use and the products we build with. Yeah, the whole restorative piece, like even restoring neighborhoods. And the third one is about the culinary experience, the quality of the products. Like the hope is that when you walk into Long Beach, you don't even have to yelp. You just know they have been vetted, they are good, and you're okay to order from any window open.
Are they all called the same thing? Are they all SteelCraft in the different locations?
The outdoor eatery itself is called SteelCraft. And then inside, you have between 7 and 9 different vendors, but they use their business name. Yeah. Like we have Smog City is our brewer in Long Beach. And then we have Beechwood in Garden Grove. So yeah.
And you also have music and other community events.
Yeah. And little did we know how much event planning would draw people to this space. I mean, we have Oktoberfest happening right now. And we have Bellflower Oktoberfest on Saturday, and that is our biggest day of the year by far. So we have a great band coming in. We have dog races, costume. It is a full-fledged event.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. So are the venues profitable now today?
Yeah. Majority of them, we are as a business, and then our vendors are as well. And if they're not profitable, those are continual conversations we're having. If you're not working out, we need to talk. Why is it? Trying to figure out the root cause.
Exactly. And it sounds like your background in HR is something that really helps facilitate those conversations, I would imagine.
It's so funny how much they collide. Like when you're living out of your giftings, you just love it. When it's so natural, you love it. And I feel like I've been able to bring in a lot of the culture making to SteelCraft. Yeah.
So what I read is that you have 27 vendors. This could have changed. How do you ensure everyone's voice is heard? And kind of secondary to that, how would you say that your background in HR has shaped your approach to how you run your business?
Yeah. So we have monthly meetings at all 3 sites where we'll go over topics, and it allows there to be a group think tank and also allow people to speak concerns, share issues, celebrate wins. So we do that collectively once a month. That's probably a big way. They can also come at any time, right? We have a team that I hope is approachable. And we have a regional manager on site that if something's not working or they have ideas, they can come to the table. So that's good. Yeah. So I think their voices are heard. Of course, everybody's going to have a voice, and some voices don't fit for what, their requests or their hopes don't align with ours. And I think it's us being able to communicate why. We don't want to just say no to say no, right? If we're saying no to something, it's because of this, and hopefully it makes sense as to why.
Are there other ways that you want to describe how human resources has impacted your ability to run a business?
Yeah, I think staffing, and for sure letting people go. Terminations, kind of the beginning of the life cycle and the end of the life cycle, that's been helpful. Recognition's a big thing. I think the more that unemployment so low and people can go to any company they want and everybody's offering more money. How do you keep people engaged here? Like, what are all the different things that we're doing to make this place good? So I think it's allowed me to see this like big picture. It isn't just about money. It's about so many other things that keep people at jobs.
Mission, I would think, is amongst one of them. So are you going to expand? Do you have plans to expand?
Yes, for sure. We're looking at quite a few locations right now.
And in California, outside of California?
Yeah, right now we're staying inside. We want to make sure that it's, that we can get somewhere within a few hours.
Excellent. How can people learn more about you or SteelCraft?
You can follow us. That's probably the best way. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And we have Eventbrite. So that's been really great if you want to go to an event. Our website's really great. It's up to date on what's going on. You can see pictures. You can read about vendors.
The URL is what? Just for people who don't know.
SteelCraftLB.com.
Cool. Excellent. Do you live stream your events out of curiosity?
You know what? We do reels. I'm not really good at them, but we do reels and stories. That's probably as live as we get. Yeah.
All right. So here are my fun questions. 2 of them. If you could have an actor play you in a movie, who would it be and why?
Oh, gosh. I don't know.
I don't even know either.
I love Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah.
There's so many new artists that we'll just say Reese Witherspoon. That'd be great.
Reese, if you're watching this, I've got a great story here for you. And the other question is, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self based on what you've learned, both in life and professionally?
Take time to truly know what you love and truly know what you're good at. I just think we don't spend the time to do that. I think that we jump into careers or we jump into college without really thinking about it. And I don't think I did that going in at 18. And I think that's one thing, is to explore, like be super curious. And then the next part is to always try. I tell my kids that all the time. Give it a shot. Worst thing you can do, it doesn't work out, and then you move on to the next. Like I talked about, like living in the grit. I feel like this grittiness, get in there, get out there. And my 12-year-old just became a little DJ, and he's small. And of course we have to like check all the songs he wants to do, and he has to get approval for them. But when I watch him out there doing he did an 8th grade graduation party, he was like having the time of his life. And I was watching him, and I need to always film these moments. But in that moment at 12, he was stepping out, right? There was a grit in him, and he was stepping out into something he loved. He loves music. He loves people. He loves fun environments. And I watch him, and I could never have done that at 12. But I'm watching him do it at 12. And it's probably not something he's going to do when he's older. Who knows? But I just want him to keep trying. Try.
Right? Speak up. It's so
Something
true.
Something might fit. And it might be the thing you can do for the rest of your life and love it. Look at that. Love it and get paid for it.
Right? It could be an amazing thing. And I totally agree. And I really appreciate that being your advice. And I try to emphasize that for my daughters. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? It might not work out. But you know what? It might also work out. And that could be amazing.
And I always think even the things that don't work out, it at least affirms that it wasn't the right thing. I think too often we live in regret. And it's like, I didn't try it. What if? If you try, there's never a what if. It was like I did. It didn't work. And I don't have to second guess in the future, should I have done it or not? I'm reading that book, The Midnight Library, and it talks a lot about this idea of regret. And I just think that when you try, you never have to look back and think, what if?
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on She Ventures today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. What a fun time.
You've been listening to She Ventures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.